The universe begins not with sound but with silence, a silence so vast, so absolute, it becomes a presence of its own. Out there, between the faint embers of dying suns and the endless canvases of blackness, whispers travel without words. They are carried in the faint glimmer of a star that flickers 1 degree too dim, in the fractured geometry of a comet that should not exist, in the echo of light curves that repeat with the cadence of a pulse. Humanity listens, always listens, to that great darkness, and on rare occasions, the darkness speaks back. It was during one of those listening vigils, one of those endless scans of the heavens, that something began to move against the ordinary rhythm of the cosmos. A fragment of light, faint and fragile, passed through the nets, cast by astronomers, a speck so small, yet so precise, that it ignited questions far larger than the instrument that caught it. This was not a planet, nor a familiar comet, nor the worn orbit of a satellite returning from its slumber. This was something new, something nameless, something that moved like a thought made visible. In that moment, as telescopes strained and sensors recalibrated, humankind felt the quiet sensation of recognition, the same quiet awe that had gripped scientists in 2017 when the first known interstellar traveler, Oumuamua, slipped into the solar system and away again like a vanishing dream. But this was different, more deliberate, more exacting. A second visitor, catalogued under the name 3I Atlas, entered the chronicle of astronomy, and with it came the weight of questions that press against the very framework of human knowledge. What was it, this object that defied our expectations of form and motion? A shard of rock cast adrift from the womb of a distant star system, a remnant of creation hurled between galaxies, or as some dared to wonder, was it the first clear sign that humanity is not alone, that the silence of the void has always been alive with presence, waiting only for our ears to finally catch its tone? For when its images first came into view, when Atlas telescopes delivered the early frames, the stillness of the cosmos seemed to rupture. These were not the images of a comet's frozen breath, nor the rough symmetry of a tumbling asteroid. They were images that carried structure, suggestion, intention. They whispered of geometry not born in the violence of natural collapse, but in the order of hands, minds, and civilizations unknown. And with that whisper, an ancient fear and longing stirred. What if the universe is not a wilderness of lonely stars, but a theatre where vast and unseen players walk? What if the first curtain had just lifted and the stage light had finally touched the edge of an alien mothership? This was the beginning of a story too immense for comfort, and too delicate to ignore, a story that would unfold through calculations, revelations, and speculations that stretched the fragile thread of human understanding to the very limits of reason. The whispers had begun, and humanity, caught between awe and terror, leaned closer to the void, waiting for the next word. The discovery did not arrive with fanfare, nor with the thunder of revelation. Instead, it slipped almost unnoticed through the cold machinery of sky surveys, those tireless robotic eyes sweeping the heavens night after night. The Atlas project, known formally as the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, was never designed to unveil cosmic secrets of this magnitude. Its purpose was pragmatic, humble even, to watch for small asteroids that might one day wander too close to Earth. It was humanity's early warning system against silent impacts, not a device tuned for myth or legend. And yet, on a night like countless others, its instruments detected a point of light that did not belong. At first, it was logged as routine. A cometary body, faint but discernible, tracked across sequential frames. Coordinates, magnitude, trajectory, these were fed into the catalogue, where thousands of such objects lived as digital fingerprints of the solar system's restless debris. But as more images accumulated, the anomaly deepened. Its path, at first indistinct, refused to trace the familiar ellipse of a comet bound to the Sunday. Instead, the numbers whispered of a hyperbolic orbit, a trajectory too steep, too swift to be of local origin. The astronomers leaned closer. The data was real. What Atlas had seen was not merely another rock in the solar system's family, but a visitor from beyond, interstellar, a traveler not born under the warmth of our star, but sent hurtling toward us from the uncharted deep. The echoes of 2017 returned immediately. Oumuamua, the first recorded interstellar interloper, had slipped past Earth in a fleeting encounter, leaving astronomers scrambling to interpret its nature. It had departed before telescopes could fully reveal its secrets. And now, as if the cosmos were offering a second chance, another had appeared. 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object ever observed, following the brief visit of Comet 2I Borisov. Its discovery was not merely an addition to the record, but an escalation, 3 visitors in rapid succession, after eons of silence. The atmosphere in observatories shifted from routine to electric. Each new detection was cross-checked, compared, and recalculated. Observers phoned colleagues at other facilities. Confirmation was needed, because extraordinary claims demanded extraordinary verification. Slowly, consensus formed. This was real. This was not an error of calibration or a stray reflection. Something foreign was cutting through the solar system. The name came quickly, as names always do. 3I Atlas, the designation marking its status as the third interstellar visitor ever recorded. But even as the nomenclature set into place, the unease grew, for the images were strange. This was not the soft halo of a comet venting frozen gases in the warmth of the Sunday, nor the hard glint of an asteroid, fractured but inert. The light curve hinted at something more angular, more defined. It rotated, yes, but not as random fragments usually do. Its reflective pattern carried hints of symmetry, the kind that invited whispers of geometry, of design. For the astronomers who first recorded its presence, the sensation was as thrilling as it was disquieting. They had stumbled upon something that would ripple outward, beyond their observatories, into the halls of theoretical physics, into the fevered dreams of science fiction, and eventually into the anxieties of the public imagination. This was how it began, a night like any other, a telescope scanning dutifully for the mundane, and then a point of light that would not obey the expected script, a point of light that carried within it the possibility of rewriting humanity's understanding of solitude in the cosmos. The Atlas survey had done its job not by saving Earth from an impact, but by opening a doorway into the greatest mystery of all. What or who travels between the stars unseen? A name carries weight. It compresses wonder into a syllable, pins mystery onto a line of text, and turns the incomprehensible into something human minds can hold. When the faint intruder was confirmed as an interstellar traveler, astronomers gathered their protocols and applied a label, 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object ever catalogued. A simple alphanumeric tag, but one destined to live in scientific history alongside Oumuamua and Borisov. The naming told a story of continuity. The first, Oumuamua Scout in Hawaiian, had drifted through in 2017, enigmatic and hurried, its presence igniting speculation and leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The second, Borisov, discovered in 2019 by amateur astronomer Gennady Borisov, revealed itself more clearly as a comet with familiar gaseous tails and icy composition. It reassured some that interstellar wanderers could indeed be natural. But the third, this one felt different again. as though the universe had returned to whisper a more cryptic stanza of the same poem. 3I Atlas was born not from the watchful eye of a single stargazer, but from the robotic persistence of an automated sentinel. The asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system, stationed in Hawaii, bore its name into the discovery. A system designed to warn of danger, now associated with a cosmic riddle. Its very purpose seemed to foreshadow the object's aura, a warning of something vast, of something we may not yet comprehend. The 3I designation was more than bureaucratic cataloguing. It was a marker in the human journey. Only 3 times in the history of our species have we confirmed such visitors, bodies not born in the cradle of the sun, but hurled to us from star systems unknown. Only 3 moments where humanity stood face to face with true outsiders, emissaries from the interstellar sea, and each time the weight of possibility deepened. The announcement rippled quietly through scientific circles. Emails carried the coordinates, observation times, and magnitudes. Astronomers adjusted schedules to track the trajectory. Within hours, international databases recorded the orbit, hyperbolic, just as expected for something unbound by our star. Yet beneath the precision of those calculations, the narrative was taking shape. This was no mere rock. This was another chapter in the strange new story of cosmic intruders. Some scientists treated the discovery with careful detachment, as a welcome chance to expand the study of interstellar debris. But others felt the stirrings of déjà vu, the same strange unease that had lingered with Oumuamua. There was a sense that these were not coincidences of celestial mechanics, not random stones cast from a galactic shore. 3 in such rapid succession, after billions of years of quiet, it pressed against the probabilities. It suggested a rhythm, perhaps even a pattern, behind the arrivals. And so, even at the level of naming, 3I Atlas carried dual lives. In the official ledgers of astronomy, it was a rare but natural visitor, the third of its kind, catalogued by the instruments of a vigilant system. In the minds of others, it was the continuation of an unfinished story, the reappearance of the unknown, returning to prod human imagination, perhaps even to prepare us for an answer we are not yet ready to hear. The quiet act of naming it was both the end of a discovery and the beginning of a mystery. With 3I Atlas, humanity once again stood at the edge of the familiar, gazing into the vast, waiting to ask, what journeys through the dark, and why has it chosen now to arrive? The memory of Oumuamua had never fully faded. It lingered like an unsolved riddle, drifting between scientific papers and speculative conversations, refusing to rest in any tidy conclusion. For many, it was not just the first interstellar visitor, it was the first whisper that the cosmos might be inhabited by intention, by architecture, by something greater than random stone. When 3I Atlas appeared, the shadow of Oumuamua rose immediately, a phantom twin haunting every calculation and every image. Oumuamua had been small, faint, and fleeting. Its path was swift, its visit brief. By the time astronomers realized its trajectory was interstellar, it was already racing away from the inner solar system, slipping beyond the reach of our most powerful instruments. Its shape had been inferred through light curves, elongated, cigar-like, though some argued for a flattened, disc-like geometry. It reflected sunlight with strange efficiency, and its acceleration, subtle yet undeniable, resisted explanation through outgassing or ordinary cometary physics. It seemed to glide rather than tumble. To this day, no consensus exists as to what it truly was. 3I Atlas, by contrast, arrived under the weight of that precedent. Where Oumuamua had been an unknown visitor arriving unannounced, Atlas was scrutinized from the beginning, every photon measured against the echoes of its predecessor. The question was unavoidable. Was this another piece of alien geology flung loose by stellar tides, or the second verse of a message still unfolding? Scientists, cautious but curious, lined the two discoveries side by side. Oumuamua, silent, sleek, resistant to classification. Borisov, familiar, cometry, a reassurance that some interstellar visitors were indeed natural, and now Atlas, poised ambiguously between the two. Its early images revealed structure too distinct for comfort, its trajectory hyperbolic but oddly deliberate, its light curves hinting at rotations that carried symmetry, not randomness. Comparisons grew bolder as data accumulated. Like Oumuamua, Atlas showed peculiar acceleration, not fully explained by gravitational mechanics. Like Oumuamua, it seemed to reflect light in ways inconsistent with dusty ice or fractured rock. But where Oumuamua had offered only fleeting glimpses, Atlas loomed larger, brighter, more detailed. The very instruments that had strained to interpret the scout of 2017 now found themselves staring into a second chance, a deeper encounter, and perhaps a greater revelation. Some astronomers argued that this was the universe's natural order revealing itself. Interstellar objects are common, and our technology has only just grown sharp enough to notice them. But others whispered of timing. Two mysterious visitors within 3 years, after billions of silent centuries? Was it chance or choreography? If Oumuamua was the opening note of a cosmic symphony, was Atlas the rising chord? In the wake of these questions, Oumuamua's legacy transformed. It was no longer an isolated oddity, but the prologue to a pattern, the harbinger of a series. 3I Atlas became not merely its successor, but its confirmation. A second messenger, bearing the same ambiguity, carrying the same weight of suspicion that perhaps we are not simply watching stones drift by, but witnessing encounters with something designed, something sent. And so, the ghost of Oumuamua breathed new life into the arrival of Atlas. Where once the first interstellar object had been a lonely puzzle, now it stood as the beginning of a lineage. Humanity, for the first time, began to ask not just what these objects were, but why they were coming, and whether their presence marked the beginning of a larger revelation waiting just beyond the edges of perception. The first images were faint, imperfect, and blurred by distance, yet they carried a weight far beyond their pixels. As the Atlas survey telescopes tracked the motion of the object across consecutive nights, astronomers stitched together the light, frame by frame. What emerged was not the familiar glow of a comet's coma, nor the irregular flicker of an asteroid tumbling chaotically through space. Instead, the images hinted at something unnerving: sharp transitions in brightness, reflective angles that seemed too clean, too deliberate. The early observations showed no diffuse halo, no tail venting volatile gases into the sun's light. Instead, the brightness rose and fell in a rhythm that suggested flat surfaces catching and releasing light. To trained eyes, it resembled the gleam of facets, the rotation of structured planes. In comets, brightness variations are irregular, caused by jets of vapor erupting at random from beneath the ice. But here, the pattern seemed almost architectural, like light sliding across the edges of a vast, angular body. Astronomers tried to restrain their conclusions. They spoke of albedo variations, of elongated shapes spinning along odd axes, of possible dust sheaths invisible to their senses. Yet beneath these cautious words, an unspoken thought persisted. The images did not resemble rock, they resembled design. As more observatories trained their optics on the object, the strangeness deepened. Its brightness curve repeated with a surprising consistency, cycling in a way that suggested not the chaos of random geology, but the rhythm of a symmetrical form, a vast sheet perhaps? A reflective sail rotating in silence? Some whispered of solar sails, the hypothetical technology long imagined by human engineers and perhaps by civilizations older than our own. Even in its distance, the object radiated presence. Unlike Oumuamua, whose faintness left much to interpretation, Atlas arrived brighter, clearer, easier to track. Its passage across the sky was not the fleeting whisper of a scout, but the lingering gaze of something immense. Each new exposure brought more detail, and with it, more unease. The first shock came when the calculated size estimates were compared against the light curves. If its brightness was purely reflective, then the body itself could not be a small fragment. It would have to stretch across scales not typical for comets or asteroids, something vast, possibly kilometers wide, yet thin enough to move with unusual agility. It was as if the object had been constructed to maximize visibility or to serve as a beacon rather than to remain hidden. In astronomy, strangeness demands patience. Scientists knew not to leap at speculation, not to surrender to sensationalism. But outside the strict discipline of the field, others began to imagine what these early images suggested. If the universe had ever sent emissaries, would they not appear precisely this way? Vast, enigmatic, symmetrical, slipping past our home star under the guise of celestial debris. For those who watched closely, the early images carried not just data but emotion, the same tingling awe as watching a candle flame flicker in a dark cathedral. The thought that somewhere, light was being reflected not by accident, but by intention. And so, the mystery deepened. A body from beyond the stars, tracked by the patient eyes of Earth, and framed not by the chaotic smear of dust, but by the sharp glint of something that seemed almost manufactured. Humanity, staring at those blurred images, felt the first jolt of realization. This was not merely another stone cast adrift by the galaxy. This was something else, something larger, something stranger. The first light had come, and with it, the first shock. The longer astronomers stared into the frames, the more the object seemed to resist the language of geology. For centuries, comets and asteroids had been catalogued as the broken relics of planetary formation, shattered remnants of creation, locked into irregular forms, scarred and jagged. Their silhouettes were rough, chaotic, their movements governed by the randomness of collisions and ancient violence. But 3I Atlas did not wear that face. Its appearance in the sky spoke of order where there should have been chaos, of proportion where there should have been fracture. Light curves revealed its strangeness first. The object brightened and dimmed with a regularity that suggested flatness, large reflective surfaces moving in and out of view as it rotated. Where ordinary comets scatter light in uneven bursts, Atlas showed periodic flashes, rhythmic, like the turn of a giant mirror in the dark. Some astronomers began to model its shape mathematically, and the models whispered of elongation, far more extreme than anything typically found among natural bodies. Not just cigar-like, as Oumuamua had been speculated to be, but vast and thin, like a shard of glass turned in cosmic hands. Others argued for a disc-like geometry, a flattened structure, glinting as it rotated slowly, giving off brightness signatures alien to ordinary comet tails. Whichever form the data suggested, the conclusion was the same. It did not resemble the random lumps of ice and rock that wander our solar system. This was geometry with purpose. Speculation was inevitable. Some scientists invoked the idea of an ultra-thin fragment, perhaps a sliver of planetary crust ejected by a violent supernova. Others suggested it might be a sheet of volatile ices, slowly peeling away under starlight. But behind these careful words lingered another possibility, one too bold to state outright, that its structure resembled design, not accident. The object's rotation was slow, almost deliberate, as though its balance was not entirely random. Its surface reflected light with a precision that made some wonder whether it was built to endure journeys not of millions but of billions of years. If so, what hands, what intelligence had crafted it? And why had it arrived here, at this particular moment in cosmic time? Theories grew bolder as the data mounted. Could it be the relic of a vast solar sail, once used by a civilization to ride the winds of starlight? Could it be a fragment of a colossal structure, drifting as debris from technological ruins we cannot imagine? Or, as the most daring minds began to whisper, could it be whole, intact, a craft moving with intention beneath the veil of natural disguise? For centuries, humanity had looked at the night sky and imagined ships among the stars. Legends of celestial chariots and flaming wheels filled ancient texts. Now, in the cold precision of telescopic data, the imagery felt less like fantasy and more like recognition. Here was a shape that defied the familiar language of comets. Here was an intruder wearing symmetry, order, and mystery. And yet, the official statements remained cautious. No agency dared to speak aloud the thought that had crept into the minds of many, that this was not merely a stone wandering by chance, but something born of purpose, something that carried the fingerprints of design. The universe, it seemed, had placed in our skies a mirror, one that reflected not only sunlight, but the very questions we feared to ask. What travels the interstellar void with shapes unknown? What secrets linger in forms that look less like rock and more like craft? The shape of 3I Atlas became the first riddle, an object that should have been random, yet stood before us as something unprecedented, a structure without precedent in nature, a geometry that pressed against the fragile boundary between science and speculation. When astronomers finally pieced together the trajectory of 3I Atlas, the unease grew heavier. Its path was hyperbolic. Yes, the signature of something not bound to our star, an outsider cutting through the solar system before vanishing back into the deep. But hyperbolic orbits alone were not new. Oumuamua had followed one, and Borisov too. What unsettled scientists was the detail, the subtle deviations, the sense that its motion carried an echo of intention. Its velocity, while immense, was curiously efficient, not random chaos flung by the violence of a supernova, but steady, precise, almost calculated. Its perihelion, the closest pass to the sun, aligned in a way that seemed improbably tuned for observation. Like a stone skipping perfectly across a pond, its path brushed past Earth's celestial neighborhood at just the right angle to be noticed, but not destroyed. Most comets wander into the inner solar system reluctantly, tugged by the sun's pull, shedding tails of dust and gas in luminous surrender. But Atlas remained eerily clean, lacking the effusive plumes expected of a frozen traveler thawing under solar fire. Instead, it moved with an unsettling silence, its course unfurling like a script already written. Mathematical models attempted to explain the strangeness. Perhaps it was a fragment of ice so depleted of volatiles that it no longer shed a tail. Perhaps it was a shard of interstellar rock shaped so oddly that its reflected brightness only seemed deliberate. Yet each hypothesis strained under the same weight. The patterns of its motion suggested coordination, not chaos. Even more perplexing was the object's subtle acceleration. Like Oumuamua before it, Atlas appeared to shift in ways unaccounted for by gravity alone. It gained a velocity too precise to dismiss, as though it were riding on forces invisible, nudged by a hand we could not see. Radiation pressure from the sun might explain some of it if the body were improbably thin. But if it were that thin, how had it survived the unfathomable journey between stars without tearing itself apart? The whispers began to rise. Perhaps this was not a comet at all. Perhaps its motion was not merely the consequence of natural laws, but the result of control. Control exerted by unknown technologies, by unknown intentions, an orbit not stumbled into, but chosen. The unsettling thought grew. If it was chosen, then chosen by whom? By what? Astronomers are trained to resist such leaps, to hold fast to natural explanations until they crumble under weight of evidence. Yet, as observatories tracked the gliding path of 3I Atlas, many felt a quiet dissonance. This object did not behave as stones behave. Its motion was too smooth, too precise, too foreign. It danced not like a fragment, but like a messenger. And for those willing to admit what their intuition whispered, the question of intent hovered like a shadow over every chart and every equation. What if this was not chance at all? What if 3I Atlas was moving not merely through the solar system, but toward it? The arrival of 3I Atlas fractured the community of scientists into camps of awe, disbelief, and speculation. Astronomy is, by tradition, a discipline of restraint. Its practitioners are trained to speak in probabilities, not certainties, to favor mundane explanations over extraordinary ones, to imagine ice and dust long before they imagine engines or architecture. Yet the data coming in from observatories across the world pressed against those instincts, forcing each observer to choose whether to cling to orthodoxy or lean into the unknown. Some saw in Atlas nothing more than a curiosity of nature. To them, its unusual shape and motion were the consequences of improbable but natural processes, perhaps the fragment of a distant planetary collision, perhaps a shard of crust stripped bare of volatiles, perhaps a survivor of violent interstellar tides. They urged caution. The cosmos is vast. They reminded their peers. Improbable does not mean impossible. But others could not silence their astonishment. The reflective patterns, the measured acceleration, the symmetry implied by its light curve, these were not hallmarks of randomness. They suggested structure, and structure, in the absence of chaos, whispers of design. Those who dared to voice this interpretation faced skepticism, even ridicule, for science carries a long memory of discredited claims. Yet the boldness of the suggestion spread like sparks across dry grass. What if this was a craft? What if this was the first undeniable evidence of extraterrestrial engineering? At conferences, debates swelled. Papers were drafted, rejected, revised. Some authors cloaked their speculations in cautious language, invoking exotic physics or unknown cometary behavior. Others spoke more plainly, citing Oumuamua as precedent and insisting that coincidences were piling too high. Could two interstellar objects in rapid succession both show unexplained accelerations, both carry geometries alien to expectation, both refuse to behave like stones? Outside the ivory walls of academia, the speculation was even louder. Journalists caught wind of the story, splashing headlines with phrases like alien mothership and cosmic visitor. Social networks amplified the wonder, weaving threads of conspiracy and prophecy. Was Earth being watched? Was humanity's long silence in the universe about to be broken? For the astronomers, the noise was both exhilarating and frustrating. They had stumbled into the center of a cultural storm. Their data was suddenly being interpreted not just by colleagues, but by millions of minds hungry for meaning. The cautious voices called for patience, for restraint, for more data before bold claims. But patience was no match for awe. For many, the very existence of Atlas so strange, so improbable, so soon after Oumuamua was itself enough to crack open the door of imagination. And so the community divided. Some clung to ice, rock, and the familiar comforts of physics. Others stared at the numbers and saw echoes of technology, of intention, of civilizations beyond comprehension. The disagreement was not just about what Atlas was, but about what humanity was prepared to believe. For the first time in generations, astronomers found themselves not only interpreters of data, but custodians of wonder, balancing between the strict discipline of science and the gravitational pull of a mystery that seemed to defy every ordinary explanation. The telescopes strained. Every night, the object drifted across the starfields, and every night new photons arrived on Earth, silent messengers carrying secrets from an alien trajectory. But the truth was slippery. The Atlas survey telescopes had been built for speed and coverage, not for precision imaging of faint interstellar visitors. Their task was to guard Earth from small but dangerous asteroids, scanning vast swaths of the sky, not to decipher the geometry of enigmatic intruders. To glimpse the true nature of 3I Atlas, the world's great observatories had to be turned toward it. The call went out. In Hawaii, the Pan-STARRS telescopes pivoted. In Chile, the powerful eyes of the VLT, the Very Large Telescope, focused on the faint streak cutting through the constellations. Infrared instruments, radio receivers, and even amateur astronomers with high-end backyard setups all sought the mysterious intruder. Each observatory captured fragments of information: brightness, fluctuations, shifts in spectrum, subtle details in its orbit. The challenge was immense. The object was distant, faint, and fast-moving, racing through the solar system like a whisper caught in a gale. Still, the effort was relentless. Every photon mattered. Each flicker of light might betray rotation, composition, or structure. Observers waited hours for windows of clarity, timing exposures to moments when the object drifted through regions of the sky uncluttered by background stars. Detectors were pushed to their limits, stretching the boundaries of resolution, teasing meaning from the thinnest strands of signal. And slowly, a strange picture began to emerge. The instruments revealed that the object's brightness curve was not chaotic, but rhythmic. Its flicker suggested large, flat surfaces, not jagged rock, not dusty coma, but something broad and reflective, repeating in its turns. Infrared readings puzzled researchers further. A natural comet should have warmed unevenly, venting gas in unpredictable jets. But Atlas radiated heat in strange distribution, as if its surface had properties engineered rather than accidental. The world's instruments were caught between precision and imagination. They strained for clarity, but what they delivered only deepened the questions. The VLT hinted at spectral lines inconsistent with ordinary carbonaceous material. Radio arrays listened, though they heard only silence, the cosmic background unbroken by signals. Yet even silence could not erase the sense that something intentional lingered in the object's quiet geometry. The frustration was palpable. Here was a visitor from beyond the stars, brighter and more cooperative than Oumuamua, and yet even the greatest machines humanity had built could not render it in detail. Each observation sharpened the outline, but left the heart concealed. It was like staring at a blurred figure across a fog-drenched field, seeing enough to know it was there, but not enough to understand its face. Scientists debated through the night. Was the geometry an illusion caused by tumbling fragments of rock? Was the acceleration the product of some exotic but natural physics, invisible to us still? Or was it, as some dared to suggest, the signature of something built, the glint of a craft vast enough to cross between stars, hidden in plain sight as a shard of debris? The instruments strained for clarity, but clarity never came. Instead, they delivered ambiguity, and in that ambiguity the human mind filled the void with possibility. The telescopes, for all their power, gave only shadows. Yet in those shadows, the whisper of a greater truth lingered, waiting for someone, somewhere, to see. Patterns, they are the language of science, the heartbeat of discovery. In the random noise of data, a repeating rhythm always commands attention because repetition hints at structure and structure suggests order. As astronomers continued to collect light curves from 3I Atlas, those faint graphs, lines of brightness rising and falling against time, began to reveal something unsettling. The fluctuations did not scatter like dice tossed in the dark. They pulsed, they cycled. They suggested a geometry turning in silence, a shape so deliberate it seemed almost to breathe. Natural bodies tumble, their rotations are chaotic, born of collisions billions of years ago, spun into irregular wobbling that rarely settles into elegance. Comets brighten unpredictably, jets erupting where sunlight strikes fresh ice. Asteroids gleam in ragged fits as their fractured faces reflect the Sunday. But Atlas behaved differently. Its brightness waxed and waned with a rhythm that suggested symmetry, surfaces of comparable size and reflectivity, turning toward and away from Earth with surprising regularity. To some, the signal was unmistakable. This was not chaos. This was a pattern, a vast reflective plane or elongated shard, rotating in balance, as if its dimensions had been chosen rather than chiseled by accident. If it were indeed a fragment of rock, it was an impossibly strange one, carved into forms nature had no business creating. Astronomers mapped the cycles, searching for mathematical consistency. And there, within the graphs, the shadows of geometry appeared, ratios between bright and dim phases that hinted at rectangles, triangles, disks. Each model they tested demanded improbable shapes, shapes that seemed more architectural than geological. It was as though the cosmos had written a riddle not in words but in the rhythm of reflected light. The whispers of design grew stronger. Could it be that 3 Atlas carried within it the echoes of construction? A sail rotating across the darkness? A frame of some vast object, reflecting as it spun? Even skeptics admitted the curves were unusual, a sterile word that barely masked the chill running beneath it. More troubling still was the possibility that the rhythm was not mere rotation, but communication. Some theorists speculated, could the variations in light intensity serve as signal, as pulse, as beacon, a message hidden in plain sight, waiting for an intelligence to recognize its beat? No evidence supported this fully, and yet the thought alone unsettled the quiet halls of observatories. For if the light carried pattern beyond geometry, it was not simply a body rotating, it was a voice speaking. Others countered with natural explanations. Perhaps the symmetry was coincidence, a shard fractured into rare but possible alignment. Perhaps sublimation of ices had carved facets that rotated with deceptive elegance. But even those explanations strained under the regularity of the signal. The universe loves chaos. Symmetry is its rarest gift. Night after night, the pattern held. Telescopes in different hemispheres confirmed the same rhythm. The object was turning, reflecting, repeating, as though bound to an internal order. And each time the data came in, the unease deepened. Patterns in the shadows, rhythms in the silence, geometry where there should have been fracture. Humanity, listening with its machines, found itself staring not just at a visitor from beyond, but at the suggestion of intention woven into its very spin. If the cosmos wished to remain silent, why would it send us such ordered light? It was déjà vu, and yet more intense, more undeniable. Just as with Oumuamua, astronomers began to notice that 3I Atlas was not obeying the simple dictates of gravity. The stars, the sun, the planets, their pulls are predictable, calculable with exquisite precision. Every rock and comet and fragment in the solar system bows to these forces, but Atlas refused full obedience. It moved as though nudged by an unseen hand, accelerating without the push of visible jets, without the plume of escaping gas. The deviation was not large, but it was real. Sensitive measurements confirmed it. The trajectory was bending ever so slightly away from what Newton's equations demanded. The numbers told the story of an object gaining velocity where there should have been none. It was the same anomaly that had haunted Oumuamua's passage, but here, stronger, clearer, stripped of the ambiguity that skeptics had clung to. For comets, such behavior could be explained by sublimation sunlight heating their icy skins, driving jets of vapor that acted like miniature thrusters. But 3I Atlas showed no coma, no tail, no venting. The object remained stubbornly clean, its outline sharp, its silence profound. To see acceleration without exhaust was to see motion without cause, and that was a violation of physics itself. The implications were staggering. Either Atlas was made of a substance unknown to our science, ultra-thin, improbably reflective, so light that the faint pressure of sunlight itself could push it across the void, or it was something more extraordinary still, a body that moved not by accident but by design. Some theorists invoked the concept of light sails, long dreamed of by human engineers. Could this be such a sail, vast and thin, gliding across the solar system under the pressure of starlight? If so, it was not just a visitor, but a traveler, a machine built to cross the distances between stars. Others whispered of technologies we could not yet name, propulsion systems that left no signature, fields that bent the fabric of space in ways Einstein himself could only have imagined. The acceleration was not violent, not erratic, but smooth, steady, purposeful, like a vessel adjusting its course with elegance beyond our reach. Skeptics worked tirelessly to explain it away. Perhaps faint jets were invisible to our instruments. Perhaps irregular shapes scattered sunlight in ways that mimicked propulsion. Perhaps the data contained errors too subtle to notice. Yet the harder they argued, the more the anomaly persisted. The numbers did not bend. The acceleration was real. And so, the unease deepened. Humanity had once again witnessed a body slipping through the solar system that did not behave as stones behave. Two visitors, both carrying the same whisper of impossible motion. Two intruders, both accelerating without force. Two signs, back to back, that the universe was not as quiet, not as predictable as we had believed. The silence of space seemed suddenly deceptive, for in the glide of 3I Atlas, many saw not a rock, not a comet, not a fragment, but a vessel, a ship, a mothership, perhaps, drifting at interstellar scales, cloaked in the disguise of cosmic debris. Acceleration without force, motion without cause, a whisper that physics alone could not contain. Humanity stood at the edge of understanding, staring at an object that defied the very rules that had guided science since Newton first described the fall of an apple. And in that defiance, the cosmos seemed to speak a single word: look closer. The laws of physics are not suggestions. They are the bedrock upon which all of science rests, the invisible scaffolding that keeps the universe comprehensible. From the orbits of planets to the fall of a stone, from the bending of light to the ticking of atomic clocks, everything we know obeys these rules. Newton gave us the mathematics of motion and gravity. Einstein stretched that framework to space-time itself, showing us that matter and energy bend the fabric of reality. For centuries, these laws have been our compass in the dark. And yet, 3I Atlas seemed to laugh softly at that compass. Its path bent where Newton's equations said it should not. Its acceleration arrived without exhaust, without jets, without cause. It gained speed as though it were lighter than it should be, as though the sun's faint breath alone could push it across the void. For a moment, humanity stared into the possibility that we were watching the rules themselves, being bent, not broken, but teased into forms unfamiliar, like notes in a song suddenly shifting key. The fear was quiet, but profound. If Atlas were merely a rock, then why did it glide like a sail? If it were a comet, why did it refuse to shed a tail? If it were truly nothing more than debris, then why did its geometry whisper of symmetry, its light curves pulse like rhythm, its acceleration defy cause? The paradox pressed against the pillars of physics. Einstein's relativity told us that no object could accelerate without force, that the universe was bound by the fabric of energy and momentum. Newton's mechanics demanded conservation of motion, precise trajectories, predictable arcs. Yet here was a body slipping through our solar system that seemed to bend those principles without apology. Some scientists felt exhilaration, as though standing at the edge of a new physics, glimpsing possibilities of propulsion beyond rockets, beyond fusion, beyond even our most ambitious dreams. Others felt dread, sensing that if such things existed, they placed us in the position of children peering at machines we could never build, never rival, never understand. The public imagination, meanwhile, soared beyond the boundaries of textbooks. If an object could move without force, could it be using space-time itself as a medium? Could it be bending quantum fields, riding waves in the vacuum like a surfer on an ocean's swell? The speculations spilled outward into whispers of wormholes, Alcubierre drives, civilizations that had learned to tame the very geometry of reality. But even within the strictest confines of academia, the implications were chilling. If Oumuamua had hinted at anomalies, Atlas magnified them. Two interstellar visitors, in such short succession, both carrying the signature of forbidden motion. Coincidence? Or was the cosmos presenting us with evidence of a principle we had yet to uncover, or a presence we had yet to acknowledge? The silence of Atlas was perhaps the most haunting part. No signals, no broadcasts, no visible technologies, only a shape, a path, an acceleration. It revealed itself not in words, but in defiance, by bending the very laws we believed immutable. It was as though the universe itself had placed a question in the sky. What if your laws are not complete? What if your understanding is only the first page of a far larger book? Cosmic rules, bent and cracked by the passing of a single object. The fear was not only of what Atlas might be, but of what it implied, that reality is deeper, stranger, and more malleable than we ever dared believe. And in that malleability lies the possibility of civilizations far beyond us. Civilizations for whom the laws we revere are but tools they may wield with the ease of breathing. It began as a whisper, a hesitant suggestion tucked between data points and speculative conversations. But as the weeks passed and 3i Atlas revealed more of its strangeness, that whisper grew louder. Perhaps this was not a comet at all. Perhaps it was constructed. The geometry suggested surfaces too flat, too regular. The acceleration whispered of propulsion too subtle, too clean. The brightness patterns repeated like the steady beat of a pendulum, not the chaotic flicker of natural debris. Piece by piece, the anomalies aligned into a possibility almost too heavy to speak aloud, that 3 Atlas might be a vessel, a ship, a mothership moving across interstellar darkness. To even imagine this was to step across a threshold. For centuries, humanity has wondered whether it was alone. But those questions had always been cloaked in distance, in the probability of planets around other stars, in the faint hum of radio waves, in the shadows of exoplanets measured by transits. Never before had we faced the possibility of a structure within our own neighborhood, moving across our skies in real time. The very word mothership carried with it both awe and unease. It implied not just travelers, but a civilization vast enough to build vessels that could endure the deep time of interstellar journeys. It suggested architecture at a scale that dwarfed our greatest machines, intentions stretching beyond the cradle of a single world. And it forced the most unsettling question of all. If this is a mothership, then where are those it commands? Some speculated it might be dormant, a relic drifting long after its makers had vanished into dust. Others suggested it could be a probe, disguised in geometry that mimicked natural bodies, silently surveying without announcing its presence. And still others whispered of something more direct, that its silence was not absence but choice, that its very motion was a form of contact. For the astronomers caught between awe and skepticism, the pressure was immense. To declare a discovery of alien origin would demand proof far beyond the shadows of light curves and the whispers of acceleration. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and evidence remained elusive. Yet within the scientific caution, imagination bloomed. Could it be that humanity's first contact was already underway, not with signals across light years, but with a silent structure gliding just beyond the planets? Philosophers and poets seized upon the possibility. They saw in 3I Atlas the image of a cosmic arc, carrying knowledge across the gulfs of space. They saw a mirror of our own yearning, our own dreams of sending ships to the stars. If we dream of building interstellar craft, why should we imagine we are the first? The thought was terrifying because it was simple. If one civilization had mastered such journeys, then others might have too. And if such ships could drift unnoticed across the stars, then how many had already passed us by, unrecognized, dismissed as comets, catalogued as rocks? Hints of constructed design, that was all they were. Hints, shadows, possibilities. Yet in those hints lay a revelation waiting to bloom, that the universe may already be alive with travelers, and that we are only now beginning to see their sails against the starlight. Skepticism is the lifeblood of science. It guards against the fever of imagination, reminding us that nature often wears disguises, that extraordinary patterns can emerge from ordinary chaos. And so, as the whispers of alien Mothership began to circulate around the story of 3I Atlas, the mainstream scientific community braced itself. The burden of proof, they reminded the world, must rest on evidence so unshakable that no doubt could remain. For every astronomer who marveled at its strange acceleration, there was another who cautioned restraint. Perhaps the trajectory data had been misinterpreted. Perhaps faint jets of sublimating ice were simply invisible to our current instruments. After all, comets have always been fickle things, unpredictable in their behavior. To leap from anomalies to civilizations, they warned, was to risk science itself. Editorials appeared in journals. Researchers emphasized the history of mistaken identities. Comets once thought to be omens, stars once believed to be fixed, canals on Mars once mapped as proof of intelligence. Again and again, humanity had misread the sky. Could 3I Atlas simply be another misreading? Another illusion magnified by our hunger for meaning? NASA, ESA, and other space agencies maintained a cautious silence. Their official statements framed Atlas as an unusual but natural interstellar object, worth studying but not worth sensationalizing. Behind the careful words lay a quiet fear, not necessarily fear of the object itself, but of losing credibility, of encouraging hysteria, of turning hard science into speculative fantasy. Even within the community, reputations were at stake. To suggest design too openly risked exile from serious discourse. Careers could falter on the accusation of pseudoscience, and so many researchers spoke only in private, admitting their wonder over coffee or in hushed conversations at conferences, while their official papers wrapped those same feelings in technical terms and cautious probabilities. Yet silence did not erase the data. The odd geometry, the clean surfaces, the unexplained acceleration, these refused to vanish. The tension grew sharper, a clash between the discipline of skepticism and the raw gravity of mystery. For some, it was safer to dismiss, to file Atlas under unusual comet and let history decide. For others, to ignore its strangeness felt like turning away from the very essence of science, the duty to follow truth, however uncomfortable, however disruptive. The divide echoed a deeper question. Was science's role to protect humanity from wonder or to embrace it? Was it safer to cling to familiar explanations, or braver to admit that something in our sky did not fit our models? Mainstream science resisted, and yet, behind closed doors, the unease persisted. The image of Atlas, vast and silent, gliding across the solar system, could not be unseen. The hints of intention could not be unfelt, and though the language remained cautious, the thought lingered, unspoken but alive. What if the skeptics were wrong this time? What if restraint was blinding us to revelation? In that tension, the mystery of 3i Atlas grew larger than the object itself. It became not just a question of astronomy, but of philosophy, of courage, of how far we are willing to let science dream. Silence can be more eloquent than speech. When 3i Atlas entered the conversation of astronomy, the public turned expectantly toward the great agencies of space, NASA, ESA, JAXA, the observatories that had always been humanity's translators of the cosmos. But what came was not revelation. It was restraint, carefully measured words delivered with the detachment of bureaucracy. And in that restraint, speculation grew wild. The official communiques described 3 Atlas in neutral tones, an interstellar object, unusual but not unprecedented, worthy of further study and subject to ongoing observation. There was no mention of geometry that seemed too deliberate, no reference to unexplained acceleration, no acknowledgement of the whispers that had begun to circle among theorists. The agencies, it seemed, had chosen silence over wonder, control over chaos. And yet the timing of their quietness was suspicious. In an age where every anomaly becomes a headline, the absence of candid commentary became louder than any admission. Why were images delayed? Why were details buried in technical bulletins? Why did officials hesitate to confront the strangeness head-on? For many, the absence of transparency hinted at something larger, either ignorance they dared not confess or knowledge they dared not reveal. Whispers of suppression began. Online communities speculated about withheld data, classified meetings, quiet directives passed through back channels. Was Atlas being studied in ways the public could not see? Were radio signals detected but buried? Thermal anomalies observed but redacted? In the void left by official silence, imagination filled the gaps, painting pictures of cover-ups and revelations locked away in the vaults of space agencies. For the agencies themselves, the truth was simpler but no less troubling. To speak boldly of alien architecture without proof would ignite frenzy. To deny the possibility outright would betray the very spirit of science. So they walked the narrowest path of all, to say almost nothing and let speculation burn itself out. But in that silence, trust frayed. The tension spread beyond the scientific community. Journalists pressed for answers, governments demanded reports, and the public fed on every scrap of leaked imagery. Amateur astronomers posted raw data online, sharing frames that showed the object's unsettling regularity. Each silence from NASA or ESA was met with louder voices elsewhere, voices eager to call Atlas what the agencies would not: a mothership, a visitor, an emissary. In the absence of certainty, humanity projected its fears and hopes into the void. Was this the beginning of contact, or the harbinger of something darker? Was the silence of space mirrored by the silence of our own institutions, each concealing truths we were not ready to face? The irony was heavy. Space agencies had spent decades trying to convince the public to care about the cosmos. Now the world cared deeply, and the agency's quiet refusal to speculate only inflamed the very hysteria they feared. Their silence became an answer in itself, interpreted not as ignorance but as concealment. And so the enigma of 3i Atlas grew not only from its physical strangeness but from the shadows cast by human institutions. The object moved silently across the sky, and in its wake it left two silences: the silence of the void and the silence of those who were supposed to speak for it. The human eye sees only the visible spectrum, a narrow band of light between red and violet. But the universe glows in many languages: infrared, ultraviolet, radio, X-rays. To know an object truly, astronomers must look with all these eyes at once, peeling away layers of disguise. And so, as 3I Atlas drew closer, the great instruments turned their attention not just to its reflected sunlight, but to the heat it carried within. Infrared telescopes, sensitive to warmth invisible to the naked eye, became the next interrogators of the mystery. What they found was unsettling. Instead of radiating heat in the uneven blotches expected of a comet or asteroid, Atlas glowed in patterns that seemed strangely uniform, strangely controlled. Its surfaces did not warm and cool with the chaotic patchwork of natural rock. Instead, the heat appeared to be distributed across its structure in ways that hinted at order. If it were a comet, sublimating ices would vent, scatter, and create hotspots detectable against a cooler background. But Atlas showed no such signs. Its thermal profile suggested something else: a material with unusual conductivity, perhaps metallic, perhaps engineered, dispersing energy evenly instead of in natural fractures. The infrared data painted the portrait of a body that behaved less like stone and more like surface. More curious still was the object's response to sunlight. Its reflectivity was high, far higher than typical interstellar debris. It shimmered as though covered in a skin designed to repel heat, to endure radiation without degradation. Some theorists proposed exotic ices, others postulated carbon composites. But hidden between their cautious words was another possibility, one they dared not frame too loudly. Could it be a shell, a hull? The thought stirred unease. A shell implies interior. An interior implies design. If Atlas carried an interior, what slept within it? Was it a fragment of a greater structure, hollowed by time, now drifting as debris? Or was it whole, intact, waiting silently as it passed through our solar system like a lantern on a dark sea? Infrared maps revealed faint anomalies, subtle fluctuations in temperature that did not correspond to any expected natural models. They were not random. They appeared almost grid-like, as though the heat was channeling through pathways unseen. To some, it resembled the pattern of panels or structures compartmentalized in ways beyond our comprehension. Still, the community resisted conclusions. Natural processes can mimic intention. The cosmos has a talent for producing illusions, but the data refused to rest. The absence of a coma, the uniformity of heat, the extraordinary reflectivity each pointed towards strangeness, and together they sang of possibility. For the first time, the term unnatural appeared in whispered drafts of papers, later softened to non-cometary or anomalous. But the meaning was clear. Atlas was not behaving as it should. It was not simply a fragment of ice or dust. It was something else, something with properties that echoed, however faintly, the hallmarks of engineering. Infrared secrets revealed themselves slowly, but they were enough to bend the narrative. To see heat spread like design rather than fracture was to glimpse beyond randomness into the possibility of purpose. And in that possibility, humanity felt again the tremor of recognition. We may not be the only architects in the universe. Time, in astronomy, is everything. An object can be catalogued, studied, debated, but its story only becomes complete when its orbit is traced, when its path is mapped across the calendar of the sky. With 3I Atlas, the equations were relentless. Night after night, observatories fed coordinates into orbital models, each refinement bringing sharper clarity. And then, as the numbers converged, a date emerged, the exact moment of its closest approach. It would not strike Earth, nor pass within reach of our planet's atmosphere, but its path would brush the inner solar system in a way that allowed for unprecedented study. For a brief span of nights, the visitor would be as close as it would ever come, a fleeting window when humanity's instruments could gather the most detail, when its secrets would be most exposed. This timeline carried both excitement and dread. Excitement, because scientists knew how rare such opportunities were. Dread, because windows close. Oumuamua had taught this lesson bitterly. Its speed carried it away before instruments could lock on, leaving only blurred traces and unanswered questions. Atlas would not stay long either. Its hyperbolic trajectory guaranteed escape, its velocity ensuring that once it left, it would never return. And so the countdown began. Astronomers marked their calendars, observatories scheduled precious telescope time, and the world prepared for what some dared to call a moment of revelation. For if ever there were a chance to know whether this was a rock, a sail, or a ship, it would come on that date. A day when humanity would hold its collective breath, watching the sky for answers written in photons. The anticipation spread beyond science. Media outlets seized on the confirmed date, broadcasting it as though it were an eclipse, a celestial event not to be missed. Headlines spoke of alien mothership reveal, speculation draped in sensationalism but rooted in the undeniable truth that something strange was coming close. Around the world, imaginations ignited. Would we finally see detail? Would an image show rivets, panels, structure? Would the void itself confess its secret? For astronomers, the pressure was immense. To waste this opportunity would be unforgivable. Every instrument that could be spared was trained, or prepared to be trained, on Atlas. The Hubble Space Telescope, the then new James Webb Space Telescope, the great arrays on Earth, all were invoked. Coordinated campaigns were drafted, international collaborations hastily arranged, all bound to that single date when the visitor would whisper most loudly. The object itself was indifferent, gliding silently on its path, untroubled by human calendars, yet the idea of an exact date took on mythic weight. Civilization began to project onto it a sense of destiny, as though the cosmos had appointed an hour for disclosure. Scientists reminded the public that revelation is rarely so tidy, that mysteries unfold in fragments. But the date persisted in cultural consciousness. It became a focal point of expectation, of hope, of fear. As the days ticked closer, a paradox unfolded. The closer Atlas came, the more uncertain humanity became of what it truly was. The data grew richer, but the anomalies grew sharper, the contradictions more glaring. It was a mirror, reflecting not just light, but our own hunger for meaning. The timeline was fixed, the encounter inevitable, and in the silence of observatories preparing for the moment, one truth resounded. This would be the night when humanity leaned closest to the dark, waiting to see if the dark would lean back. Among the corridors of academia, few voices carried as much weight or controversy as that of Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who had dared to suggest that Oumuamua might not be a rock at all, but a piece of alien technology. When 3I Atlas appeared, the resonance with Oumuamua was impossible to ignore, and Loeb's earlier claims returned like echoes, this time with sharper focus. If one anomaly could be dismissed, two demanded attention. The Mothership hypothesis took shape quietly, then loudly. Loeb and others argued that 3I Atlas displayed the same bewildering signs: unexplained acceleration, reflective surfaces, peculiar geometry. Where Oumuamua's faintness had left interpretation uncertain, Atlas was brighter, clearer, harder to dismiss. To Loeb, this was not coincidence but confirmation. two visitors in quick succession, both behaving as if they were more than mere debris. In lectures and interviews, he drew comparisons to our own technological aspirations. Humanity itself had already conceived of solar sails, ultra-thin sheets pushed across space by starlight. If we had imagined such vessels before leaving our own solar system, why should we not expect older civilizations to have already built them, sending emissaries across the galaxy long before our species first walked upright? A sail drifting past our star would look precisely like what Atlas seemed to be, a vast, reflective geometry, gliding silently, propelled without fuel. The hypothesis was bolder still. If 3I Atlas was not a fragment but a whole, not debris but vessel, then perhaps it was not merely passing through. Perhaps it was a mothership, capable of carrying smaller probes, dispersing them like seeds across the solar system. Perhaps Oumuamua itself had been such a probe, the first sign of a larger structure yet to follow. The two could be linked, not separate mysteries but stages of the same revelation. The idea ignited fierce debate. Many scientists recoiled, dismissing the theory as sensationalism, a distraction from sober study. They warned that framing Atlas as a mothership risked eroding credibility, fueling conspiracy, and leading the public astray. But others were willing to entertain the thought. The anomalies were undeniable, the coincidences troubling. To imagine that two interstellar objects in succession carried similar mysteries stretched probability. To imagine intention behind them, though daring, was not absurd. Beyond science, the mothership hypothesis captured the world's imagination. Artists rendered visions of vast alien arcs drifting in silence. Writers and philosophers debated the implications of being observed by minds older and greater than our own. The media, hungry for spectacle, amplified the idea, turning Atlas into a cultural phenomenon as much as a scientific one. And yet, beneath the speculation, the core truth remained. The data itself carried strangeness that demanded explanation. Whether mothership or fragment, artificial or natural, Atlas did not behave as a comet should, and in that gap between observation and understanding, the most extraordinary possibilities found fertile ground. The hypothesis was not proof, it was a mirror, reflecting both the daring and the fear of our age. For to imagine 3I Atlas as a mothership was to admit the possibility that we are not the only architects in the universe, and that we may already be standing in the shadow of another civilization's gaze. There are moments in science when the ordinary tools of explanation collapse, when the familiar equations seem too small for the phenomenon at hand. With 3I Atlas, the data strained the boundaries of celestial mechanics. Newtonian gravity could not contain it. Cometary physics failed to explain it. Even the models of solar radiation pressure seemed insufficient unless the object were impossibly thin. And so, some scientists began to reach deeper into the vaults of theory, searching for answers not in the familiar, but in the exotic. Quantum physics, with its shimmering paradoxes, offered one possible key. The vacuum of space, long thought to be empty, is not truly void. It seethes with fluctuations, particles blinking into existence and vanishing again in intervals too brief to measure. Could it be that 3I Atlas had found a way to ride these quantum shadows, harnessing the latent energy of the vacuum itself? If so, its motion would appear as acceleration without exhaust, propulsion without fuel. Others speculated about interactions with dark matter, the unseen mass that makes up most of the universe, whose presence is known only by its gravitational pull. What if the object's composition allowed it to couple with this hidden substance, gliding along currents invisible to our instruments? In such a case, Atlas might be revealing not merely alien technology, but a new law of physics waiting to be uncovered. There were whispers, too, of space-time manipulation. Einstein's relativity teaches that mass and energy bend the fabric of reality. If an advanced civilization had learned to fold that fabric deliberately, perhaps their vessels could slip forward with subtlety, leaving no wake, no exhaust. To us, it would look like a comet accelerating mysteriously. To them, it would be as simple as adjusting the curve of the road beneath their feet. These were not claims made in bold headlines, but speculations whispered in research groups, drafted in footnotes, hinted at in late-night discussions among physicists. To invoke quantum fields, dark matter interactions, or space-time engineering was to court controversy. Yet the strangeness of Atlas demanded courage, demanded at least the willingness to imagine. And so, in some circles, 3I Atlas became less a comet and more a laboratory, a test case for theories that until then had been confined to chalkboards and thought experiments. If its behavior could not be explained by known physics, perhaps it was a signpost pointing toward the unknown, an invitation to expand the boundaries of our knowledge. But with these daring ideas came unease. If Atlas truly moved by means beyond our understanding, then the intelligence behind it was operating on a level far beyond ours. To harness quantum fluctuations or space-time curvature would be to command the universe itself, to play not with engines but with the fabric of reality. Such mastery would render our rockets and probes as primitive as firelit rafts beside nuclear submarines. The possibility was exhilarating and terrifying, for if Atlas was built with such knowledge, then humanity was standing not just in the presence of another civilization, but in the presence of gods. Quantum shadows at play, exotic forces glimpsed through the glint of a passing object, theories stretched thin yet shimmering with possibility. Atlas was no longer merely a mystery of astronomy, it was a window into the frontier of physics, a reminder that the universe may carry rules we have not yet even begun to imagine. Two competing visions began to crystallize, each vast in scope, each demanding humanity to confront the deepest edges of knowledge. On one side stood cosmology, with its grand abstractions of dark energy, the mysterious force driving the accelerated expansion of the universe. On the other side stood engineering, alien engineering, the idea that the strangeness of 3I Atlas was not the work of nature's hidden forces, but of intention, of design, of civilization. Dark energy had long haunted physics. It was a name given to ignorance, a placeholder for something unseen yet immensely powerful. Telescopes had revealed that the universe was not merely expanding but accelerating, as though pushed by an invisible hand. No particle had been found to explain it, no field measured, no mechanism understood. It was the cosmos itself defying comprehension. Some physicists began to wonder, could 3I Atlas be a manifestation of this same mystery? A natural body, yes, but one whose strange trajectory revealed subtle interactions with dark energy, a clue carried into our solar system from the vast cosmic sea. If true, Atlas might not be a vessel at all, but a messenger nonetheless, not of intelligence, but of fundamental physics whispering through matter. But then there was the other vision, bolder and far less forgiving, alien engineering. The possibility that the acceleration, the symmetry, the anomalous heat distributions were not the side effects of cosmic forces, but the signatures of technology. A sail of reflective material, thinner than paper, yet stronger than steel, drifting for centuries or millennia between stars. A hull that channeled heat in patterns too orderly for geology. A vessel built to endure journeys we can scarcely imagine. Between these two visions stretched a gulf. Dark energy suggested a universe more mysterious than we had ever guessed, a universe still writing its own laws. Alien engineering suggested that the universe is already inhabited, and that we are not the first to learn its secrets. One explanation expanded our physics. The other expanded our place. Debates raged. Which was more improbable, that a fragment of rock could reveal hidden aspects of the cosmos, or that civilizations older than ours had already seeded the stars with ships? To some, alien engineering seemed arrogant, a projection of human dreams onto cosmic silence. To others, dark energy felt like an evasion, a refusal to confront what the evidence seemed to whisper. Perhaps the most haunting thought was this: the two were not mutually exclusive. What if alien engineering itself had been born of a mastery of dark energy, of quantum fields, of the very forces we only now begin to suspect? What if Atlas represented both a vessel, yes, but also a clue, a demonstration of physics harnessed into craft? In that possibility, the dichotomy dissolved into something even more profound. The universe itself as workshop, its deepest mysteries already in the hands of minds far beyond ours. Dark energy or alien engineering, natural law or constructed design. The debate was not only about 3I Atlas, but about the direction of human imagination itself. Were we to expand science into the unknown, or to admit that the unknown might already be watching us? The object moved silently still, indifferent to the quarrels it ignited. But its presence was enough to split humanity's story into two paths of thought, one in which we sought deeper truths of physics, and one in which we prepared ourselves, perhaps, for company. The closer the object drifted toward its moment of nearest approach, the more instruments humanity bent toward it. The silence of official agencies could not contain the rising urgency among astronomers. It was as though the entire planet had unconsciously leaned forward, straining to hear what 3I Atlas might say. The call went out to the most powerful tools of observation machines, built not for curiosity alone, but to pierce the edges of reality itself. The Hubble Space Telescope, orbiting high above Earth's atmosphere, turned its eye upon the faint traveler. Its sharp optics gathered streams of light unblurred by air, resolving the object with clarity no ground-based telescope could match. The James Webb Space Telescope, new to its role as humanity's most advanced observatory, brought its infrared vision to bear, mapping the heat signatures across the object's surface. Webb's instruments, capable of reading the faint glow of galaxies born billions of years ago, now studied this nearer but no less ancient visitor, scanning for spectral fingerprints that might betray its composition. On Earth, vast radio arrays stretched their arms. The Very Large Array in New Mexico, ALMA in Chile, and Arecibo's successors all turned their ears to the void, listening for the faintest whisper of artificial signal. For decades, SETI had strained to hear the universe, catching only silence. Now, with a confirmed interstellar object gliding past, the question could not be ignored. If it were a vessel, would it not speak? Would it not, at least once, break the quiet? The response was silence. No radio pulses, no narrowband emissions, no whisper of deliberate communication. The object glided on, mute as stone. And yet, even in silence, its strangeness persisted. Webb's scans suggested unusual thermal behavior. Hubble's images showed reflective patterns too sharp to dismiss. The radio silence itself became a paradox. For a mothership that remained quiet was almost more unsettling than one that announced itself. Elsewhere, particle detectors and high-energy observatories sought anomalies in cosmic rays, hoping the object's passage might bend the flow of invisible particles. Even instruments meant for Earth's defense radar stations, designed to track satellites and missiles, turned their gaze upward, probing Atlas as if it were a phantom trespassing on forbidden skies. All of science seemed to align for a single purpose: to measure, to record, to seek. It was a moment of unity, a planetary chorus of instruments singing in different frequencies, each searching for the hidden truths of a body that refused to explain itself. And yet, despite all these efforts, the enigma only grew. Each tool added detail, but each detail deepened the contradiction. Its surfaces were too reflective, its heat too uniform, its motion too precise. And still, there was no signal, no direct proof, no admission from the object itself. It carried its mystery like a cloak, daring us to guess. Eyes on the sky. That was humanity's only choice: to watch, to listen, to measure, to wonder. We aimed our greatest tools at the visitor, but the visitor gave us only riddles. And in that act, 3i Atlas revealed itself not just as an object of study, but as a mirror of our limitations, the limit of our telescopes, the limit of our imagination, the limit of our place beneath the stars. It began, as such moments often do, not with an official announcement but with a leak. The first frames released from the Atlas telescopes had been shared only in small circles, buried within data archives where trained eyes passed them for anomalies. But images have power, and power has a way of slipping through fingers. Within weeks, unfiltered captures of 3i Atlas began appearing in corners of the internet, carried by whispers, posted by those who claimed access to restricted channels. The photographs were grainy, distant, and yet they struck like thunder. To the untrained eye, they showed little more than a faint smear of light against the velvet of the stars. But to astronomers and enthusiasts who studied them closely, the patterns within the smear told a different story. Brightness that rose and fell in intervals too regular, angles that hinted at edges sharper than natural geology should allow, lines that seemed too aligned, too measured, as though a skeleton of symmetry lay hidden in the blur. Soon the images spread beyond small forums. Larger outlets caught wind of them, and suddenly, leaked Atlas images became a phrase whispered across media feeds. Analysts drew overlays, amplifying the patterns, showing grids where there should have been chaos, planes where randomness should have ruled. Some swore they could see the suggestion of sails, vast reflective panels gleaming against the Sunday. Others argued for a hull, a great body with facets arranged like architecture. NASA and ESA remained quiet, offering only the reminder that raw data is messy, that compression and noise can create illusions. But silence breeds suspicion, and the more officials hesitated, the more the public imagination ignited. To many, these were not smears of light, but glimpses of revelation, humanity's first sight of a vessel from another star. The frenzy built. News anchors asked scientists to comment on whether the object could be artificial. Talk shows debated whether governments were hiding the truth. Social media flooded with edits and enhancements, each frame dissected as though it were a sacred text. Some saw structures too symmetrical to deny. Others warned against pareidolia, the mind's habit of finding meaning where none exists. Still, one fact held: the images were stunning in their implications, not because they proved alien design, but because they refused to settle into ordinary explanations. Every smear of light seemed to hold contradiction. If it were a comet, why no tail? If it were a rock, why such reflectivity? If it were random, why such rhythm? For many, this was the moment the enigma escaped the confines of science and entered the bloodstream of culture. The images were not just data points, they were icons, symbols of a universe that might finally be revealing its hidden inhabitants. The world had seen countless artist impressions of UFOs, starships, and motherships. But here, for the first time, was something real, a body tracked across the sky, observed by multiple instruments, captured in images that were not speculation but evidence. Evidence, and yet not proof. That distinction mattered little to those who gazed upon the leaked frames and felt the chill of recognition. The stunning Atlas images had broken free, and with them, the mystery was no longer confined to observatories. It belonged to humanity now, and it could not be contained. The images spread like fire, and with them came something more powerful than data: awareness. For the first time, the public was not merely reading second-hand accounts of astronomers' speculations. They were seeing the raw glimmers of the enigma themselves. Even though the frames were faint, blurred, and imperfect, their very imperfection carried weight, a reminder that this was not art, not fiction, but reality caught in the nets of our machines. The reaction was immediate, and it was profound. Some responded with awe, a quiet reverence, as though gazing upon a sacred relic. Others met it with unease, seeing in the faint geometry the shadow of something too large, too alien, too beyond comprehension. A cultural shiver ran through humanity, the old fear of the unknown awakening in modern form. Media outlets scrambled to interpret the story. Headlines veered between excitement and alarm. Alien mothership in our skies. Cosmic visitor defies physics. Humanity faces its first neighbor. Commentators debated endlessly. Was this proof of life beyond Earth, or simply a comet dressed in strange disguise? The discussion became less about what 3I Atlas was, and more about what it meant. Religious leaders spoke of revelation, some declaring it the fulfillment of prophecy, others warning of deception. Philosophers wrote of the fragility of human solitude, of the moment when we might no longer mean only Earth. In classrooms, students stared at the images and felt, perhaps for the first time, the weight of their own smallness against the vastness of creation. And still, there were skeptics. Many scientists urged calm, insisting that the data remained ambiguous, that noise could mimic symmetry, that natural processes often surprise us with forms that appear unnatural. Yet their voices were drowned in the rising tide of wonder. Humanity had waited too long for such a sign. Even uncertainty was enough to ignite hope. The emotional impact rippled across societies. Some celebrated with optimism, dreaming of contact, of knowledge exchanged, of cosmic kinship. Others recoiled in fear, imagining invasions, domination, or the unsettling possibility that humanity was nothing more than a primitive species noticed by giants. Stock markets fluttered, security councils convened in quiet urgency, and the collective human psyche shifted beneath the weight of the possible. But perhaps the most profound awakening was not fear nor hope, but reflection, for in the silent glimmer of 3I Atlas, many saw themselves. They saw the fragility of a species that has just begun to step into space, already confronted with the possibility that others have been here long before. They saw the thinness of our defenses, the brevity of our history, the audacity of our dreams. For centuries, the question of, "Are we alone?" had been confined to speculation. Now, for the first time, the universe seemed to answer not with words, but with presence. Not with signals, but with shadows. Not with certainty, but with possibility. And in that possibility, the human imagination awoke, restless and alive. Public awakening is rarely orderly. It comes in waves, contradictory and chaotic. But the awakening brought by Atlas was undeniable. It was the collective realization that something vast had entered our story, and that whether natural or constructed, it had already changed the way we see ourselves beneath the stars. The closer the object drifted, the sharper the question became. Was this contact, or was it coincidence? The data told two conflicting stories, and each carried its own weight. If it was coincidence, then Atlas was merely another fragment cast into the dark, a shard of interstellar geology caught by chance in our nets. Its strangeness could be explained with enough patience, with enough creative physics. Perhaps its acceleration was sunlight pushing against a fragile shell of ice. Perhaps its geometry was the trick of reflective planes carved by cosmic violence. Perhaps the symmetry in its light curves was nothing more than our pattern-hungry minds painting order upon chaos. If so, then humanity had simply witnessed a rare but natural event, and the universe remained indifferent, silent, unknowing. But if it was contact, then every assumption we held about our place in the cosmos shifted at once. Contact did not have to mean signals or greetings. It did not have to mean engines flaring or languages spoken. Contact could be this: a silent vessel drifting into the solar system, showing itself through its geometry, through its motion, through its refusal to obey the simple laws we expected. Perhaps it was not meant to speak. Perhaps its presence alone was the message. Astronomers debated endlessly. Some argued that without explicit proof, without transmissions, without an image showing structure beyond doubt, it could never be called contact. Others countered that the absence of communication did not erase the evidence of intention. A mothership could remain silent by choice. A probe could observe without announcing itself. A civilization advanced enough to cross the stars might not see us as ready for dialogue at all. Philosophers turned the debate inward. If contact had already happened, if 3i Atlas was itself the encounter, would we even recognize it as such? Would we expect too much, demanding voices and signals, when the truth might come only as geometry and motion? Perhaps the tragedy of our age is not that no one speaks to us, but that they do, and we do not yet know how to listen. The public, meanwhile, split along fault lines of imagination. To some, Atlas was already proof, a visitor sent to announce that we are not alone. To others, it was still stone, and to call it otherwise was folly. Between these poles stretched a spectrum of interpretation. Contact disguised as coincidence, or coincidence that looked too much like contact to ignore. The object itself offered no clarification. It drifted on, silent as ever, refusing to confirm or deny the meanings projected upon it. In that silence, humanity revealed more about itself than about the visitor. Our hunger for connection, our fear of insignificance, our inability to stand comfortably in uncertainty. Was it contact or coincidence? The cosmos gave no answer, and yet, in the weight of that question, something had already changed. For once we ask it sincerely, once we stare at a body in our skies and wonder if it carries intention, we have already stepped into a new age, an age where silence itself feels like dialogue. If 3i Atlas were truly constructed, if its symmetry, its acceleration, its silent glide were the marks of intention, then the question was no longer, what is it, but who built it? And behind that question lay an even deeper one. What kind of civilization could shape matter on such a scale, send it drifting across the gulfs between stars, and ensure it endured for millennia, perhaps longer? Humanity's imagination leapt immediately to civilizations beyond our measure. On Earth, we had only just begun to reach space in fragile capsules, our spacecraft still tied to the thin leash of chemical rockets. Our probes, Voyager and Pioneer, wander only at the edge of the solar system after half a century of travel. They are tiny, mortal, their lifespans measured in decades, their power dwindling. By contrast, Atlas seemed vast, ancient, purposeful, and whole. The framework of speculation had long been prepared. The Kardashev scale, a measure of civilizations by their energy mastery, offered a way to imagine what hands might have built such a vessel. A Type 1 civilization harnesses the full energy of its planet. A Type 2 civilization captures the light of its star. A Type 3 civilization commands the energy of entire galaxies. If Atlas was indeed a mothership, was it the work of a Type 2 culture, a people who had tamed starlight into propulsion? Or was it even greater, an emissary from minds whose power dwarfed entire suns? Its design hinted at efficiency rather than extravagance. a sail thin enough to ride radiation, a hull capable of dispersing heat across its surfaces. These were not excesses of power, but refinements of elegance, the hallmarks of intelligence that values endurance, patience, subtlety. Perhaps the builders were not conquerors but watchers, seeding the galaxy with vessels meant to drift quietly, gathering, observing, reporting. And then came the more unsettling thought. If this was a mothership, what smaller craft might it carry? Was Oumuamua one of them, a detached probe released years earlier, slipping close to Earth to taste its starlight before vanishing again? If so, then Atlas was not only an object, but an origin, a parent to scouts we had already seen, a presence not alone, but multiplied, scattered across the solar system like seeds upon the wind. The implications were staggering. A civilization that could build such ships was a civilization that had already achieved what we only dream: to live beyond the cradle, to endure beyond the fragility of single worlds. They would know the starfields not as distant fires, but as ports, waypoints, destinations. To them, interstellar travel would not be miracle but routine. What would such beings think of us? Would they see humanity as a young sibling, fumbling with rockets, taking its first steps into the void? Or would they see us as an echo of themselves, a fragile species rising into the same cosmos they had long since mastered? Or perhaps they would not see us at all, our presence too faint to register against the noise of a galaxy already alive with countless civilizations. The mothership hypothesis was more than astronomy. It was a mirror held up to our future, a vision of what might be possible if our species endures. In Atlas, we glimpsed not only a visitor, but perhaps our own destiny, the day when ships of our making will glide silently across the stars, carrying our questions, our echoes, our presence into the eternal dark. But until then, Atlas remained the reminder: if it is built, then we are not the first. The sight of 3I Atlas stirred not only speculation about alien craft, but also a haunting reflection on ourselves. If it was truly a vessel, then it was a mirror, not of what we are, but of what we are not yet. In its silence, humanity was forced to confront its own fragility, its own infancy, its own smallness against the cosmic canvas. For all our telescopes, all our instruments, we still struggle to leave our home. The International Space Station drifts only a few hundred kilometers above Earth, fragile as a bead of glass upon the ocean of space. Our most ambitious probes, Voyager, Pioneer, New Horizons, are tiny sparks drifting outward, carrying the faint hum of human ambition but destined to fade into silence. Compared to a vessel that could cross interstellar gulfs, we are children still building rafts on the shore. And yet, perhaps that was what made Atlas most unsettling. If it was built, then its builders had already endured the trials we still fear. They had survived their own fragility, their own crises of energy, war, and extinction. They had risen beyond the dangers of planetary limits and stretched their presence across the stars. To see their work was to glimpse a possible future for humanity, if only we survive long enough to reach it. But survival is not promised. Our species walks a knife edge. We wield weapons capable of ending us, technologies that consume our own biosphere, fears that turn inward rather than outward. The reflection of Atlas was not only inspiring, but accusatory. It asked whether we could last long enough to stand among the builders of ships like it. Philosophers saw in the object a kind of cosmic humility. For centuries, we told ourselves stories of being chosen, of standing at the center. But to see geometry and motion in a visitor from another star was to see how small we truly are. One voice among billions, fragile and fleeting. The universe had been whispering this truth for centuries, in the silence of the stars, in the immensity of time. But Atlas brought it near, forced it into our gaze. Religions responded in their own ways. Some embraced it as a sign of creation's vastness, evidence that the divine was far grander than we ever knew. Others recoiled, uneasy with the idea that humanity was not unique. If there were civilizations among the stars, then our myths had to expand or fracture. But perhaps the deepest response was more personal, more human. People stared at the images and felt a trembling in their own hearts. They looked at their children, their cities, their fragile lives, and asked, "What are we in the face of such immensity? What does it mean to build, to dream, to love, if civilizations older than mountains cross the galaxy unnoticed?" The answer, perhaps, was that fragility itself was precious. Our smallness was not failure, but reminder. If others had built ships like Atlas, it meant that survival was possible, that intelligence could endure, that the story of life need not end in silence. And so, even as it humbled us, Atlas offered a promise, a vision of what humanity might become if we can look beyond our own quarrels, beyond our own fears, and embrace the endless night not as enemy, but as home. For in the shadow of something vast, humanity was reminded of its place not at the center, not at the end, but at the fragile, beautiful beginning. The closer scientists examined the mystery of 3I Atlas, the more it pushed physics itself toward breaking point. Its strange acceleration, its geometry, its silence, each seemed like a direct challenge to the frameworks that had guided human understanding for centuries. And so the question emerged with unsettling force. What if the laws we revere are not wrong, but incomplete? What if Atlas is the first hint of physics yet undiscovered? Einstein's relativity had once rewritten the universe, bending Newton's neat mechanics into the curvature of space-time. Quantum theory had shattered certainty, revealing reality as a blur of probabilities. Now, some whispered that Atlas was a herald of the next transformation, a phenomenon that hinted at principles beyond even relativity and quantum fields. One possibility was propulsion through vacuum energy, the seething quantum foam that exists even in empty space. If a civilization had learned to manipulate this ocean of fluctuations, they might achieve acceleration without exhaust, gliding as though space itself were a current. To us, it would appear as defiance of Newton. To them, it would be the most natural form of travel. Others proposed modifications of gravity itself. Theories of modified Newtonian dynamics, once fringe, returned to the discussion. Could Atlas be revealing that gravity behaves differently on interstellar scales? Or was it coupling with dark matter, surfing the invisible scaffolding of the cosmos? If so, its motion was not defiance, but demonstration showing us physics we had not yet written. The most radical voices suggested that Atlas was not a ship at all, but a probe sent to teach us, a silent teacher whose lesson lay not in communication but in contradiction. By refusing to obey our equations, it forced us to question them, to search for the gaps, to look again at the universe with fresh eyes. Yet, such ideas carried unease. To admit that Atlas bent the rules was to admit that our mastery of the cosmos was fragile. Our rockets, our satellites, our grand theories, all might be primitive sketches compared to the truths hidden in the motion of a single interstellar body. It was humbling to imagine that a drifting shard could rewrite our textbooks, that the cosmos might reveal its next secret not in a laboratory, but in a silent visitor gliding past our star. For some, this was exhilarating. To stand at the threshold of new physics was to stand where Newton and Einstein once stood, staring into the unknown with the chance to reshape knowledge itself. But for others, it was terrifying. If such principles exist, then they are already wielded by civilizations far beyond us. What then? Are we to them observers, students, or something more fragile still? And so Atlas pressed us to the edge of physics, its path a paradox, its presence a question. It was not only an astronomical mystery, but a philosophical one. Do we accept our laws as absolute, or do we have the courage to let them bend? The edge of physics is not comfortable. It is a cliffside where certainty crumbles and speculation expands. But it is there that discovery waits. And in the silent passage of Atlas, humanity was given a glimpse of that edge, and perhaps of the vast new landscape that lies beyond. The date approached with the weight of destiny. Astronomers marked it in their logs, media outlets plastered it across headlines, and ordinary people circled it on calendars as though preparing for an eclipse or a prophecy fulfilled. For months, the numbers had converged, narrowing the orbit until they gave not just a range but an exact moment, the day when 3I Atlas would sweep past at its closest point, offering humanity its clearest chance at revelation. Telescopes were synchronized like an orchestra, tuning for a single performance. Hubble and Webb stood ready to catch their frames. The great radio arrays primed their receivers, searching for whispers in the electromagnetic dark. Even radar stations, normally tracking satellites and debris, turned toward the path, eager to map the intruder's shape. Every instrument humanity could muster was aligned, all bent toward the same question. Would this be the night the silence finally broke? The anticipation seeped far beyond science. News anchors spoke of it breathlessly, blending speculation with spectacle. Spiritual groups called it a moment of reckoning, a sign written into the heaven. Governments, more cautious, convened private briefings, worried about the cultural and political tremors if something extraordinary were revealed. In living rooms and rooftops, ordinary people prepared to watch the skies, even if all they could see was a star no different to the naked eye. But beneath the spectacle, there was a quieter current. Fear. What if the object revealed itself as nothing at all, just another shard of rock masquerading as mystery? What if all the whispers of motherships and alien design collapsed under the glare of detail? Humanity longed for answers, but answers can disappoint as easily as they inspire. And yet, the opposite fear lurked just as strongly. What if it was not rock? What if, in the high-resolution frames of Webb or the deep exposures of ground-based arrays, structure truly emerged panels, symmetry, hull? What if silence gave way to a signal, faint but undeniable? Humanity dreamed of proof, but proof carries weight. Proof would mean we are not alone. Proof would mean we have already been found. The world teetered between awe and anxiety. Astronomers, too, felt the pressure. For them, this was not merely a chance for discovery. It was a test of science itself, a moment when every lens, every detector, every photon mattered. Their careers, their reputations, their disciplines were suddenly drawn into the public gaze, measured not by equations but by the collective hunger of billions for meaning. And so the night arrived. Across observatories and across time zones, eyes lifted toward the sky. The visitor, indifferent to calendars, glided silently on its path. Its closest approach had no sound, no drama, no sudden flare, just the steady continuation of its orbit. Yet the weight of expectation made the moment feel like history. Humanity was waiting, breath held, as if the cosmos itself had promised revelation, waiting for an image, for a signal, for a truth that might never fully come. The encounter was not yet over, but the moment of greatest intimacy had arrived. All that remained was to see whether the silence would deepen or whether, at last, it would break. In the weeks leading up to and following its closest approach, something strange happened in the collective psyche. Humanity began to look at 3I Atlas not only as a physical object, but as a reflection of time itself, a glimpse beyond the horizon of the present, a window into futures that had always felt distant, unreachable, almost mythical. The object's indifference forced us to reckon with our own mortality, our own fleeting span against its ageless journey. For if Atlas was natural, then it was a fragment of a story written billions of years ago, a shard hurled across the galaxy by ancient cataclysms, carrying within its silent geometry the memory of places we will never see. To study it was to peer back through eons, to touch the remnants of collisions that happened before Earth's mountains had risen, before our oceans had filled, before life had learned to breathe. It was a messenger not of aliens, but of deep time, reminding us how young we are, how brief, how fragile. And if it was artificial, the implications stretched even further. A vessel capable of traversing interstellar space must have been built to last not centuries, but millennia. Its journey would have outlived empires, languages, perhaps even species. It was not just technology, but legacy, a structure meant to endure across epochs. In its silent passage, humanity glimpsed what it might mean to become timeless, to create something that survives its makers, to leave behind artifacts that carry knowledge beyond the lifespan of civilizations. This thought pressed heavily on the question of destiny. Would humanity ever build such vessels? Would we too craft sails to ride starlight, machines to glide between suns, motherships to carry our dreams into the endless dark? And if we did, would they outlive us, drifting as echoes of a species long gone, waiting for others to find them and wonder at our presence as we now wondered at Atlas? The encounter thus became less about the visitor itself and more about what it revealed in us. Scientists debated physics, journalists debated disclosure, philosophers debated meaning. But beneath it all, the human spirit wrestled with its place in time. Are we at the beginning of a story that will stretch into the stars, or are we a fleeting spark destined to vanish before we can even step beyond our cradle? Some felt exhilarated, seeing in Atlas a promise that survival is possible, that intelligence can endure long enough to spread across the galaxy. Others felt despair, fearing that we are too fragile, too reckless, too blind to ever follow. Yet all agreed that the object forced us to look forward, to consider futures beyond the span of our lifetimes, beyond even the lifespan of our species. It was not only a scientific event, it was a cultural and existential mirror, reflecting our deepest hopes and fears. And in that reflection, we saw time not as an endless abyss, but as a river flowing beyond us, carrying civilizations we cannot yet imagine. A glimpse beyond time that was the true gift of 3i Atlas. Whether rock or vessel, natural or built, it became a symbol of what lies ahead. The possibility that the universe is not empty, not silent, not lifeless, but alive with journeys that span not years, but ages. Journeys that remind us that we too may one day leave shadows across the stars. And then, as all things do, the moment passed. The object that had haunted headlines, unsettled physicists, and ignited imagination drifted onward, growing fainter with each night. Its path bent away from the sun, out toward the cold expanse where our telescopes struggle to follow. In time, it would vanish altogether, another whisper swallowed by the void, leaving behind only the fragments of data, the scars of speculation, and the questions that refused to fade. Yet its silence lingered. It had not announced itself, had not sent signals, had not betrayed its secrets in a single undeniable flash. It remained ambiguous, unyielding, its identity suspended between geology and architecture, between comet and craft, and in that ambiguity lay its power. For mysteries, unresolved, do not die. They deepen, growing roots in the soil of imagination. Humanity was left with two truths, equally profound. First, that even in the absence of proof, the cosmos had reminded us of our fragility, of how little we truly know. And second, that even the suggestion of design, Even the whisper of company in the dark was enough to change us. Atlas had arrived like a mirror, reflecting not its own face but ours, our hunger for meaning, our fear of insignificance, our longing to belong to something larger than ourselves. The scientists returned to their work, drafting papers that measured uncertainties, refining models, reminding the world that mystery is not yet proof. The public moved between awe and disappointment, caught between those who wanted certainty and those who cherished wonder. But all, in some way, had been altered. The night sky was no longer empty. The silence was no longer silence. Every comet, every asteroid, every faint glimmer of light carried now the possibility of intention. And so, the story did not end with Atlas's departure. It continued in us in the way we looked at the stars, in the way we began to measure our place in the cosmos, not only by what we know, but by what we dare to imagine. The mothership was never confirmed, never denied. It passed without greeting, without threat, without revelation. But it left behind the most enduring gift of all, mystery. And mystery is the soil of both science and spirit, the force that keeps us searching, questioning, reaching. Atlas faded into the eternal night, and humanity stood beneath the stars, changed by what it could not answer. For in the silence of the visitor, we heard the echo of our own future, and the promise that the story of life among the stars is only beginning. Now the story softens, the edges blur, the pace slows. The visitor drifts away, not vanishing, but folding back into the fabric of the universe that bore it. We return to the stillness of the night sky, the same sky that has watched over every generation, every dream, every fragile breath of humanity. The stars remain, patient and silent, yet different now, for we have looked at them with new eyes. There is comfort in this quiet. Though the object left us with more questions than answers, it also reminded us of the vastness that holds us. The mystery is not a wound, but a reminder that discovery is endless, that wonder is inexhaustible. The universe does not reveal itself all at once. It speaks slowly, in fragments, in whispers, asking us to listen with patience. Perhaps 3ATAAATLAS was a rock, a fragment of a shattered world. Perhaps it was a sail, a vessel, a mothership carrying silence instead of words. Perhaps it was both, or neither. It does not matter. What matters is that, for a moment, humanity looked up together. Hearts and minds turned to the same enigma, united not by answers, but by awe. And as the night deepens, we are left with an image not of the object itself, but of ourselves beneath the stars. Small, yes. Fragile, yes. But also capable of wonder so great it pierces the dark. Capable of questions that stretch across galaxies. Capable of dreams vast enough to one day meet the silence with voices of our own. The visitor is gone, but the mystery remains, and in that mystery there is hope. Sweet dreams.